Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us for this special event. I am January Ann Pardo, and I am a member of the Advocacy Committee from the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination. And this broadcast is brought to you in partnership with the Global Health Press. We will bring you the latest news on infectious diseases, vaccines, and vaccination from the Republic of the Philippines. Today, in commemoration of the World Meningitis Day, we would like to focus on meningitis and the impact on the health status of Filipinos. We would like to welcome our panel, Professor Emeritus Lulu Bravo and Professor Annalisa Ong Lim. Welcome to our session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janie Pardo. I am Professor Emeritus Lulu Bravo, Executive Director of the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination and a Pediatric Infectious Disease. With me today is another professor who is a vaccine advocate from the university and also from the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination. Professor Anna Ong Lim, please.
Thank you, Professor Bravo, and greetings to everyone who's joining us in this podcast. It's a privilege to be part of this discussion, and I know we will have a really interesting and in-depth focus on meningitis. Janie?
Thank you for joining us. To start off our session, can you give an insight on the current situation of meningitis in the Philippines? Let's hear from Professor Anna first.
Well, Dr. Janie, there are actually more than 2.5 million cases of meningitis worldwide every year. And unfortunately, the Philippines is one of those high burden countries which contributes at least 2,000 cases on a year-to-year basis. We have all sorts of etiologies that are being documented from our country. We have the usual bacterial meningitis cases, but we also pick up a fair number of viral and fungal pathologies. However, the most notable, or the ones that really cause the highest burden, are of course the ones that are really targeted by vaccines like pneumococcal meningitis, meningococcal meningitis, Japanese encephalitis, and also I'd like to highlight a problem with tuberculosis. The most common age group that's affected are those children under the age of 5 years. And unfortunately, 1 in 5 survivors will live with lifelong disabilities like hearing loss or brain damage, epilepsy, no? And even limb loss in the case of meningococcal disease. To speak a little bit more about meningococcal disease, it's actually endemic to the Philippines, and there are about 100 cases reported yearly. We have no seasonal variation, but we have had outbreaks. In a recent review published earlier in the 2000s, we had an annual incidence of 0.02 cases per 100,000 population annually. And this is comparable to other countries in the region like Thailand and Vietnam. The overall case fatality rate for meningococcal disease can be about 50%, while those for other etiologies of meningitis can range between 30 to 50%. Professor Bravo, would you like to add some more information about this?
Well, thank you, Anna. You gave a very high burden of disease, but in the Philippines, although we are monitoring these cases under the Philippine Integrated Disease Surveillance and Response System, there are many factors that contribute to a sparse data. And it's really difficult to determine the true burden of meningococcal disease, for example, in the Philippines. One of these factors that may be included is underreporting because only sometimes meningococcemia, septicemia are reported and the rest are not. So there is indeed poor surveillance, and sometimes we are unable to determine the exact etiology of the meningitis in the Philippines, which, according to some areas, are also prone to outbreaks. Remember the outbreak of 2004 in Baguio, where there was at least 400 cases of meningococcus with a 35% mortality rate, especially in children. I think they were really young ones who died in that case. And this actually occurred within a month. And the health workers had to be given vaccination in order to control that outbreak. So over to you, Janie.
Okay. So in prevention of the outbreaks, what do we need to note as possible signs of symptoms of meningitis, Professor Lulu?
Well, you see, before there's an outbreak, there are usually need to really recognize the possible signs and symptoms of meningitis. Now, meningitis is the swelling of the lining around the brain and the spinal cord. And it is a life-threatening condition where death can occur within 24 to 48 hours. But mind you, when you do have any child or even a young adult who starts to have severe headache, high fever with persistent vomiting, and even lethargy, it's high time that they be given medical attention immediately. Do not wait because this could actually mean life or death for this child. Now, other symptoms may occur like mottled skin, and some would have seizures later on, or even stiff neck and some seizures, delirium. But these are actually sometimes late in coming. But we do need to make sure that you recognize it early for medical attention.
Okay. So you are discussing of acute symptoms. Professor Anna, are there any cases that patients with meningitis do not present with acute symptoms?
Thanks, Janie, for that question. The bigger burden of meningitis, of course, can be traced to bacterial pathogens, and these cases do present with the signs and symptoms that Professor Bravo has described. But in many LMIC settings, I think we need to recognize that other pathogens can be responsible for chronic presentations. I'd like particularly to highlight recognition of TB meningitis because it is quite an important consideration, particularly in our country. We have small children, even adolescents who present with non-specific neurologic signs like headache, behavioral changes, even faltering school performance. And on investigation, we pick up a diagnosis of TB meningitis either through analysis of their cerebrospinal fluid or through imaging, which presents with characteristic findings. So I think this should be part of the differential diagnosis in settings where TB is a particular public health problem.
Okay. So considering all of the various signs and symptoms that the patient could present, it definitely would entail a lot of workup and possibly long-term treatment, which could have an impact on the family's finances and as well as the quality of life of our survivors or our patients. Do you think the Philippines is doing enough in controlling meningitis or even supporting the treatment for meningitis? Your thoughts, Professor Lulu?
Well, the government have passed a law which is called the Universal Health Care, which actually tries to support early treatment, early diagnosis in many cases. As you know, meningitis could be a long-term disease. But other than that, we do need to put into the program, the National Immunization Program, the inclusion of the Hib meningitis, which has been in place since 2010 in the Philippines, the PCV, which was actually introduced, the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, which was introduced in 2012. And of course, we do have also the Japanese encephalitis vaccine, which usually is given in high risk areas because of limited supplies. But we do believe that in the future, though the meningococcal vaccines are available only in the private sector, with the realization that it can actually come out with outbreaks and meningococcal disease can also be prevented through the vaccination process, we may be able to also include that as part of the control measures because not only can we go for the men ACWY, which have been here for as long as two decades, but also the newly launched Group B meningitis vaccine can also be part of the national immunization program. Since in the Philippines, it has been also found that Group B meningococcal is also highly endemic. So we do need to improve further the surveillance and the monitoring. And should we have early recognition, we can actually stop any outbreak and be able to do more for our patients' survival.
Professor Anna, can you give any additional comments?
When you were to look at control strategies for TB meningitis as a particular focus, then this would be part of, or really this should include interventions for the control of tuberculosis as a whole. We know that TB is a particular sequela of, rather TB meningitis is a particular sequela for children who get the disease or the infection early. And it can also be a problem for even older children, adolescents who have uncontrolled or unaddressed TB infection. So really, these interventions that provide better control for TB as a whole will definitely impact on the incidence of TB meningitis.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. I would like to share that the WHO has a target by 2030, they want a elimination of epidemics due to bacterial meningitis, a reduction of vaccine preventable meningitis by 50% and deaths due to this by 70%, and the reduced disability and improving of quality of life after diagnosis of meningitis. What recommendation do you think would be appropriate for the Philippines to meet this goal? Professor Anna?
So thanks, Dr. Janie, for bringing this up. I think there are really many factors that we can focus on for improving control of meningitis. And I think we need to really invest in education and information dissemination for both the lay public as well as healthcare professionals. There has to be a heightened awareness that meningitis continues to be a problem, and early recognition leads to early intervention, appropriate management, which will then limit the possibility of adverse outcomes and lifelong sequela. Professor Bravo, would you like to add anything?
Yes, Anna, we can never underestimate the value of vaccination when it comes to controlling all these illnesses. It is the most cost-effective preventive measure. So all the vaccine preventable type of meningitis like pneumococcal, meningococcal, the HIV, the Japanese encephalitis are really needed and sustained throughout so that we can really achieve the target. We do need continued research and development, promoting research to develop better vaccines and, of course, better treatments.
Thank you very much for your insights. Before we close our session, may I ask for our final key messages to share with our public? Professor Anna?
I think the discussion that we just had is very appropriate as a way to highlight the need to renew efforts for the control of meningitis. And I hope with this upcoming World Meningitis Day celebration, bringing people into the conversation about meningitis will lead to improvements in terms of awareness and eventual control in much the same way that a focus on other public health problems like pneumonia or diarrhea actually led to better control, better or rather improvement, no, in terms of the global disease rates. So I have high hopes that a similar approach, looking at meningitis from a public health lens, will also lead to a more concerted, coordinated effort so that we can impact on its prevalence and incidence.
Thank you. Professor Lulu?
Well, I think Janie and Anna, we have actually highlighted the need for raising awareness of the burden of meningitis, whether it is the acute bacterial or TB meningitis, and that we do need to get support for all those victims of meningitis. But in addition, we need to engage partners because in working together, all the stakeholders, we can be very successful in achieving the targets of the WHO of reducing meningitis, and we can defeat meningitis. So thank you very much to our panel today.
Thank you very much. This has been an absolutely fruitful session. As we close our segment today, please stay tuned for future health updates and future discussions. Thank you.